Hello and welcome to this fifth Rook School video. And today I'll be talking about the Philidor position. Very important. This probably comes about many times in your chess games. If you make it to an end game, you could be behind by one pawn or ahead. So I'll show a couple different positions here or examples of this Philidor position. So basically, you have white. It's their turn to move. They have this extra pawn. So, of course, they're trying to move it up the board and promote. So, what should they do here? Now, I'll show you what black should do if it was his turn to move. He wants to try and control the sixth rank here. So with white to move, he wants to prevent that. So rook to g6 here is played, preventing a Philidor position setup with the rook, the defending rook, on the sixth rank. So white prevents that. Now, what should black do here? They move over and grab the opposition here. So the game continues with white moving to the side of the board where there's the most checking distance. So it's, I better take that back. So there's more room if he could go here to h6, but of course the rook is there preventing that. So he has to go to the short side of the board. So that's something to keep an eye out on in these end games as well. You want to get your rook to the long side of the board where there's the most squares or distance between you and the king you're about to check. So anyway, moving on. The rook drops back here where it can harass the white king. And then we have a check. The king just moves back in front of the pawn. And now king up to d6 here. So now it's kind of tricky on what to do here. Rook to e1 is the best move, and you can see by the computer evaluation here, where the other options are not so good. So rook to h6, that would allow the pawn to push forward, and then the game may continue with the king moving over here because there's a threat of mate with rook to a8, and then the game might continue with check. The king is being pushed away from the pawn, and then we have king to d7, and white is making progress up the board. It may continue with something like this. The pawn pushes up, check. The king uses the pawn for cover, getting behind the pawn, and the rook can swing over. But at this point, and look at the evaluation, white is just winning here. And also, it's good to learn the Lucena position before you go into these Philidor positions. So that's I did another video on that you can check out. But learn the Lucena position, and then these Philidor positions will be a little bit easier because they can be pretty complicated. So if you just stay behind the pawn, you might have something like this. But then you can just push forward, promoting the pawn. So instead of that, king to f7, if you try a check, then the king can just start running down the board until it attacks your rook, and then this pawn can try and promote here. All right, so back to where we were in the game. In this position, we want to get behind the passed pawn. So then now we have this. Oh, and one other thing, I ought to show you this as well. If instead you check, well, then the king can just once again use this pawn for cover. Then you're threatening a mate, so the king has to move. And then you have check, that, and the king moves up the board and helps this pawn move up the board as well. So back to the game. The rook to e1 move, check. The king has to move here, and check again. And if the king goes back, well, now you can use the pawn for cover, threatening a mate, so the king would have to move, check, and once you move over to the side here, the king can come back over. And this is a good defensive setup because now this pawn cannot move forward, or the rook can capture the pawn with check and use this king, to defend the rook if it captures that pawn. So the game may continue with check. Once again, the king goes up there and check. And now if something different is tried like this, we have rook to a1. You have to be careful because rook to e2, then you have this kind of move. The king could come back over to f7, but then you can move forward and check the king. If check happens, well, then you just move the king here, and then the pawn can march up the board. So after rook to a1, we have rook to d8, and then rook to e1, and here it should end in a draw, but I don't know. You see how tricky this is. So I had a little trouble loading these examples into the computer, so let me show you some easier examples in Philidor type positions. Hopefully you're not too confused. This can get a little tricky. So let me try and load up another position from the library. All right, I have 4 more examples here. All right, let's see here. Analysis, and let's go back to all right, so this is the position that we just looked at, and this time it's black's turn to move. So what should black do? Well, in the Philidor position, to set it up, you want to put that rook on the 6th rank here to prevent the king from being able to make progress. And of course you can't push the pawn, or you can just go ahead and capture here and knock that pawn out. Or can you? Let's see here. If you push that forward, oh, you have to watch out. There's a little trick there. So if they push this pawn, I don't think you want to capture, because then there's a check here driving you away, and then white can pick off your rook. But this allows a check here, and then black can pick off your pawn. So different, little things to be aware of. So back to the game. Rook to h6. So first I'll run through this, and then we can look at other scenarios, different variations. So you have check. The king moves up, staying in front of the pawn. White moves over to where he has the most checking distance here. And then the rook just moves back and forth, guarding the 6th rank here. So finally this pawn moves up, but now you can drop back here and start checking the pawn, or excuse me, checking the king from the back. So rook to a4 to help defend against that, but now the king just moves forward here. So rook to a7 check, and the king just backs up. And so, if the king tries to make progress, you can just start checking. And then where does the king go? You just check back and forth. If he gets too far away from the pawn, then you pick that pawn off. So, other things that could happen in this position, somebody might say, well, what about, rook to f7? Guarding here, preventing a check. Well, then you have rook to a8, and you're going to come down here and check anyway from this side of the board. So this is an important tactic to know in rook endgames, is swinging your rook from one side to the other and then moving down to check the king. So that can be very dangerous in rook endgames. All right, so back to the initial position. So we don't want to play rook to f7 because we'll still get checked anyway from this side over here. And what about rook to h1? Deciding to go back here immediately and start checking. Well, that could allow rook to g7 check. Now the king is forced to move up to the 8th rank up here. So if the king moves, now you have king moving forward, and rook to h6 here. Well, you can just push the pawn and block that. And then what? Maybe rook to h8, because you have to stop this mate that could happen. Or the king could move over this way, but you're making progress and getting this pawn and your king moving forward. Let's see. In this position, what if rook to d1 was played? Check. Or excuse me, rook to d1. Check. Well, now you have king to e6, so using this pawn for cover. So something to remember in these positions is you don't want to push the pawn up to the 6th rank too early, because you may need to use that for cover from checks, either from the side or from the rear. All right, back to the initial position. So we go back to here. We see that rook to h6. Black wants to try and take control of the 6th rank, preventing forward momentum of the pawn or the king. And then after check, what do we have? King retreats, moving over to the other side, king or rook to g6, so just moving back and forth, keeping an eye on the 6th rank. The pawn pushes, rook to g1, coming back to start harassing the king. And now rook to a4. If we have king to d6, well then rook to d1 check here. And it looks like the game would end up being a draw because the king would move and you just start checking the king all over the place. So we would want rook to a4. And you're trying to set up a Lucena type position. Maybe get behind here, and block attacks on your, well, that doesn't work. Excuse me. The Lucena position is where your king, you start moving up the board and you're one square away, and the king is blocked off to the side. So anyway, you come down here, rook to a4. In this position, what can be played? The king can just move forward here. If rook to d1 were played instead, rook to d1, check, well, you have rook to d4, and then capture, king captures, something like this. And that would just lead to a draw. So anyway, you see how if you maintain that 6th rank, it definitely helps on your way to obtaining a draw in these type positions. If we go back to the beginning. So, try and grab the 6th rank here. Okay. I hope you're not too confused here. Let me take another look at this position. So here it is white to move, and this ends up being a draw. So the Philidor position, if the pawns are rook pawns or knight pawns, it's a lot harder to win these type positions. So here, the pawn is trying to move forward, but this game would end up being a draw because what do you do here? Check. The king moves, and you just go back and forth. And it would end up being a draw. So if you tried something else, let's see, rook to b7. Here's something to also look out for. If you go here, they go here, you do not want to push this pawn up here because then there's a check and your king would have to back up, and then black could pick off your rook. So, I don't know, we could take a look at that. That, check. Now you have to back up. Where do you go? Here. And they would just pick that off, and then black would just be winning. So, one other option, if they try this, you definitely don't want to do that either. You have to stay in the corner here because now you have the king moving up. The rook could move back here trying to check, but then check, the king moves. Now you can move over here, and your king can try and, get in front of the pawn. I don't know, maybe something like this. Check. And the king moves over, and that pawn will be able to march up. Let's see. If something like this is played, thinking that you can help guard it, well, it doesn't work because you have a double check here by the rook and the queen, and the king would have to move. All right. Well, let me show you another example here of things that can happen in these type Philidor positions. All right. Let's see. So here, white's turn to move. What can they do here? We have rook to a7. So the threat is a mate up here. And the king moves over. Check. And, white would just be winning. So these are things you want to avoid when you're trying to set up a Philidor position. Because now the pawn will march up there. Let's see. Here's another type example of something to avoid. So moving over here, threatening the mate. we go this way, but there's a check here. So king to c8, and now check. The rook is picked off, and you can promote the pawn as well. So these are things to watch out for. And if we go back and look at this, we see that one of the problems is that the rook is made into a passive defensive piece up here, just defending back rank checks instead of, down. Well, of course, it has to block checks up here, but you want to try and prevent the king and the pawn from marching up here to the 6th rank, and that's why in Philidor positions you want your rook on the 6th rank. So if we go back and look at this initial position, let's see. All right, so here, this is the Philidor setup where you want to move that rook here. So now you have an active rook that's preventing these pieces, preventing the pawn from moving up, preventing the king from moving up in the future. And so this is what you're looking for to try and go for a draw. Sure, white can check you with this move, but then you can just back up and you're preventing, the pawn can push forward, but I guess we can take a look at that if that pawn moves forward with something like that. Well, now you can just go all the way down here, and if they keep pushing, well, you can just start checking and just check this king all over the place. Or you could just go here immediately, targeting that. Let's see. They're recommending rook to c1. Rook to a1. I don't know. If you check, then what does he do? He starts moving all around. You don't want to go here, or you check him and then you just pick this off. So I don't know. Now it's just a draw. You just start checking that king all over the place. If he moves too far away, then you can just pick off the pawn. All right. Well, I'll just end it there. So just remember, in the Philidor positions, you want to set up a Philidor position by putting your rook on the 6th rank here to prevent the white king from moving forward. The pawn can't move at this time. And I'll run through this real quick one more time so you can see what should be going on here. You back up. If they go over here to get some more checking distance by moving to the long side. If you look here, there's only 3 squares. Here there's 4. They just are further away from the opponent's king. So then you just maintain control of the 6th rank. If they finally push that pawn, well, then you can drop back here and start harassing the king. So if they try and block, well, let's see. Then you can move forward, check, just move back, and what do they do then? It just goes back and forth here. All right. Well, I'll end it there. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please like and subscribe for those that haven't already. And thank you for watching. Have a super chess day.